Hi, Phil Swift here for new Flex Super Glue. What's truly amazing is that our Flex Super Glue is so strong that just one drop virtually welds itself to the surface and can lift over 3 tons. Forget those old super glues, get the one that's new, Flex Super Glue. Go to flexsealproducts.com/3-ton lift to learn more about how one drop lifted 3 tons. For demonstration purposes only.
This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I'm Steve Gould. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Thank you for finding the show. If you're new, thank you for coming back. If you're a old salt or an old vet of the show, I appreciate you the most. So I'm hoping if you found the show, you're going to binge listen. No credit to me, just to the men and women law enforcement that have come on. I have heard the most insane stories of my life by virtue of being a host of this podcast, and I know that you will love it and enjoy it and gain a better appreciation for these people that are doing this job. Thank you for all the 5-star reviews on Apple, guys. We're so close. We're at 918. I would really love to get to 1,000. 1K, baby, with the big boys. It's really embarrassing when I'm hanging out with all my other podcast and YouTube friends and I don't have 1,000. So if you could get me up there, I don't have any friends like that, but if you could get me to 1,000, I would really, really appreciate it, guys. That would be fantastic. And also, I should mention, give me a follow on Things Police See, the Instagram account. Super late to the game in everything but podcasting. I don't have a ton of you guys following me on Instagram, and I should mention that. Go there, follow me there, and also YouTube now has the Patreon members. They get all the interviews and videos early, but every interview does go to the YouTube now. So there's a ton of the interviews there. So if you hear me talking, I'm doing a Cops in the News, or I'm talking to a guest, and we have a graphic or video or anything like that, you can check that out on YouTube. If you could give me a follow there, that would be fantastic. And of course, there's a Facebook group you can join also. But all that to say, we have a fantastic guest from the great state of Florida. So you know the guy can't even help it. He's got stories just by virtue of the fact of where he's policing. He is active duty, so we're not going to talk specifically about his agency. But what I can tell you, he's got 20 years on the job. He's a sergeant, major metropolitan department in Florida. He spent many years as a firearms instructor, firearms expert. He's also shot competitively with the USPSA, and he's also shot for Team Sig Sauer, which is just like 45 minutes north of where I am. They're up in New Hampshire. Did that for 2 years, and he's the host of a great podcast, Firearms Nation Podcast. So without further ado, let me bring on Arik Levy. Sir, Arik, was it right?
No, it's Arik.
Damn it. I heard you say it too, and I was like, I'm going to nail it.
Okay, it's all right. It's a great way to start the show. Thank you.
Right. I was looking at it, and I'm like, maybe he's like, his family's from Israel, and that's how they say Arik. But no.
It is. My father is from Israel, and it is pronounced Arik. Just think of the R. Arik.
Arik. Let me write a big R in front of me. So, no, I can't write Rick because then I'll say Rick.
You were nailing that intro. It was so awesome. And then at the last second, you just pulled the rug out.
Oh,
it's quite all right.
They're used to it, brother. That's how I roll. Hey, man, I'm new to your podcast, and I got to tell everybody, I don't listen to a lot of police or law enforcement podcasts, and yours isn't like specifically that, but it's a firearms podcast, and I have a lot of listeners that are interested in that. Man, super interesting. I was going to training all last week, had a lot of time in the car, so I was listening to it, and episode in particular with, was it Mike Wood? Is that?
Mike Wood. He's a great guy.
You had him on, and he broke down some of the biggest gunfights kind of the century that a lot of police officers kind of refer to, the FBI shootout, the Newhall shooting with the CHP. And there is, and he's a big wheel gun guy, big revolver guy. So he had a perspective where, they kind of, those agencies kind of used, specifically Newhall, they were kind of blaming, rather than tactics or training, they were more like, hey, we just don't have the right gear. We got to get this new stuff, and then it will be all better. And this guy, Ewan Wood, really broke it down in a kind of nuanced way that was super interesting. And because as a firearms instructor myself, when I went through training, and I've even come out of my own mouth before talking to my students, the Newhall thing, there's a shooting in Newhall. It's up near, kind of near Santa Clarita, north of LA. And we were always told, like, yeah, that these 4 CHP guys got killed because they were trained to shoot their revolvers and then put their brass in their hand and then put it in their pocket so they didn't get their range dirty. That's the version I was told. Turns out not even true at all.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's funny. It's like a game of telephone, right? And it just ended up with that segment of, they collected their brass. And, you know, like I mentioned in my podcast, it was basically they were trying to talk, I guess, to students that it was subconscious skill, right? The things that you do every day, that's what you're going to do under stress. So they kind of made a myth out of it that it was these officers were picking up the brass because that's what they did every day. And you know, I like the fact that Mike, who I call him our resident historian, because he writes these books and he's so meticulous in his research. But I'm glad he set the record straight on that, because it's something that, you know, perpetually, there's a lot of myths that have stayed in firearms. You know, you put the magazine on the deck with the AR, you're going to cause a malfunction and all these other things that obviously nowadays we know is not true. And I'm sure you'll get some hate from that, or that the 9mm isn't as good as the 45. See, I'm trying to get all your listeners riled up. My 45 is so important. It's bigger. It's make bigger holes. And yeah, we all know the truth.
Yeah, the only reason I have a 45 is because they don't make a 46, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's tons of 45 guys. So I mean, the 1911 platform is like, the first time I held one, it's like shaking hands with an old friend. I mean, it just feels nice. But I tell people all the time, and my friends that are not law enforcement, because, you know, some guys that are real into guns they'd like to see cops with a tricked out 1911. You know, like, well, isn't that the gun you want? Well,
they have that now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a lot of SWAT guys, high speed guys have that. But for me, a guy who's on a patrol level, what I see is guys who don't care about shooting. They don't shoot enough. They don't take care of their firearms. So I want them to have a Glock, because the Glocks are cheap. They're easy to fix. There's not a lot of parts. They're accurate and they're reliable. So if you have a police department full of high-speed dudes that, like, really maintenance their weapons, get them nickel-plated 45s. It's great. You know what I mean? But for my money, you can't beat the Glock, because it's just a utilitarian, you know?
Well, there was some...
Or a SIG.
I was going to get to that. There's some departments down in my area that, going back probably 2010, 2011, 2012, they were issuing their SWAT guys Springfield 1911s.
Nice.
I don't remember specifically which Springfield it was, but it was 1911. And I was teaching a firearms instructor class, you know, for the state certification. And so they were running this, you know, there's like 3 or 4 of these guys in that class so they could become firearms instructors. Inevitably, those guns were the ones that broke down every time.
Right.
And after class, they were cleaning them religiously so they wouldn't have that problem. So at that time, you know, I know there was departments out west that allow individual officers to carry 1911s. When I say west, I'm not talking like California. I'm talking like the Montanas, the New Mexicos, Nevada, places like that, they're allowed to have 1911. But it is a gun, for those that, you know, have shot it or run it, you know that it can be very temperamental. Obviously now with the staccato, maybe things are going to change. I know, like you said earlier, that's the cool guy gun. Everybody who has a capital T for tactical in front of their name, they're running that gun. God bless them. I don't have that kind of money right now to buy that gun. Maybe down the road, I'll get it. But right now, I'll stick with my SIG. You know, I'm a big SIG fanboy. I started with a Glock. When the 320 came out, I went to the 320, and I've been shooting that ever since.
Yeah, my dad, at the end of his career, he was carrying a P226, and, you know, it's like a Cadillac. When you shoot that gun in 9mm, it is, I mean, there's hardly the the muzzle flip's minimal. It's a big, heavy gun. It's reliable. The single action, once it gets into single action, is like butter. It's a great gun. I think, and our state police are just going to the SIG 3, the new version of the SIG 320. It looks like the Noisy Cricket almost. It's got like all these attached. It's got the light. It's got the red dot. But the one I really like is, and I swear, guys, we won't talk too much more about gun nerd stuff, but the Legion. My buddy let me borrow the X5 Legion, and it's got tungsten mixed into the plastic to give it more weight. And it's such a sweetheart of a gun. But unfortunately, I work for a small agency, and I'm surrounded by small agencies. And unless you get a chief or a town that gives you a really big budget, SIG is kind of always a little out of reach. You can get a Glock in the box for $400, and the SIGs are always double or more, you know?
Well, I don't work for SIG, so I can't promise anything, but I would reach out, or if one of the law enforcement reps are watching this or listening to this episode, to reach out to you to get your department. I know in the past that other departments, they would match gun for gun with whatever you have.
Oh, really? So, interesting. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, we have that academy. We were just talking about yesterday. I went to church and I went to a friend's house afterwards, and big SIG guy, and he is like, would love to go to the SIG Academy because they offer not just law enforcement, special forces, all that stuff. I mean, and like specialized police groups, but they teach classes to the working man too. You know, anybody can take a class up there, and the training is just phenomenal. And the facility, I hear, is just very cool. I've never been there.
I've never been there either. I want to go. Yes, it's like Valhalla, Nirvana, whatever you want to call it, whatever religion you're from. It is Mecca. There's another one of firearms training and shooting. It's a huge facility. So yeah, it's the playground for us when we want to go to fantasy camp. That's what we can do. Yeah.
My sergeant I used to work for in Cape Cod, his son was special forces and got out, and then just desperately wanted to work there. So I think he took a job as just like a tester, like the testing department, which is like you just shoot 1 round or 2 rounds like all day long, check it off. But now he is actually one of their instructors, and like he's got the Instagram account you look at and you're like, why isn't this my life? Because he's just always doing something awesome. You know what I mean? Can you imagine all the SIGs and then like, yeah, just take a case of ammo with you?
All these guys that get these types of jobs or sponsorships where they're getting, I mean, ammo is king these days. And so if you're getting all that ammo and, you know, look, I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of retirement, you know, stuff like that is appealing. But, you know, we'll see how things go. It's still a couple years away.
Arik, I got a connection up there, so let me know, brother.
I like South Florida. I like the weather. It was 90 degrees today and sunny, and I know some places are still snowing. So
New Hampshire's a little different than that.
Yeah, I spent 20 years when I was growing up living in Chicago, so I've had my share of snow and cold. I like this better. I also like the state better too.
Well, Smyrna, Georgia, not too far from you.
Not too far. Not too far. I have to switch to a Glock, and I don't think that's going to happen. Although I love Glocks, I have Glocks. I just don't think it's going to happen.
I hear you, brother. All right, sir. Arik, let's go way back to a young patrolman Levy. And can you tell us about your first intense or your first adrenaline drop, first hot call, let's say?
I'll say, so I work in an area when I started, I hate using the term ghetto because there's no ghettos, but it was let's say an impoverished area. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, big agencies, but you have, you know, small districts all around. So my first night as a solo officer was my first call right out of roll call. We didn't have enough. It was an alarm call, and I had to go by myself. And I pull up like tactically, like I'm supposed to do, and everything like that. And my car backfired, and I thought I was taking shots, and my heart, I mean, like the adrenaline dump. I was like, oh my God, I'm getting shot. And then I said, calm down. Everything's okay. It's just the car. So that was my first big adrenaline dump. But then obviously, you work in an environment like that. I mean, my God, you see everything. You get, and obviously since 20 years, things have changed, but the car chases, the canine tracks, the hostage situations, all these things. I mean, I feel bad for guys that don't get a chance to experience that and start in places that are, a little bit more, I mean, still police work, but it's a little bit more mild. You get things every once in a while, but the guys that are in it all the time, you really learn how to deal with that type of environment, I should say, where you're not an occupying force, but you're definitely there more than a security guard. You have people who want to take you out. You have people who want to hurt you. You have people who are not on your side, who aren't going to help you.
Right.
And you really got to form that teamwork with your partner and with your squad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so much has changed even since I started in the earlier 2000s, where it was like, now it's like unless it's like a felony or like a murder suspect almost, it's like you're not chasing somebody. Like, you call on a chase on the frequency and the supervisor is going to come on and say,
right.
What did he do? How fast are you going? No. See you later. It used to be like, just out of pride, you do not let somebody get away. You get them. I don't care if it's speeding. You don't let someone get away. That's the way it was.
Yeah, I mean, the other day on the radio, I heard our highway patrol was in pursuit of, I guess it was a drunk driver, and it was a high-speed chase coming across, and we're like, okay, well, we're going to make sure that we have our guys around the city just in case this guy veers into our city. But they were asking, like, hey, are we getting involved? And like, you guys got it. I mean, we're not chasing, right? Because I know that phone call would come. If I authorize it, that phone call from, up above is that bat phone is going to go right. Like, are you out of your mind? What are you doing? So, yeah, we don't chase for much anymore. The forcible felonies, yeah, we'll be chasing more. And, I'm sure hopefully none of the bad guys are listening to the show to know what we're doing, but they know already.
Yeah. And know who really knows is motorcycles. Because those pricks, they see you in the rear view and they're like, wah! They're just gone.
They come up next to you on the highway and flip you off and then take off.
Yeah. Because, pushing a patrol car to 150 is just, it ain't happening. I mean, that's just common sense. You can't do that. You're gonna wipe out. But yeah, what kind of car were you driving that would backfire?
It was I want to say it was like a 1992 Crown Vic, right? And when you're a brand new guy, I started in 2003. So when you're a brand new guy, they give you the worst, crappiest car. Because I know you're a podcaster and I know you're up on YouTube. I'm going to keep the expletives to let's say another word, but the crappiest car. And I got the car and there was like this massive ass groove from the guy who had it before. There was food underneath the seat.
It smelled like farts.
Yeah. You turn on the lights and the power just, the overhead lights and the power just draws down. It's like somewhere there was a short. I don't know. It was a horrible experience. But that was my car, and yeah, it backfired on me. If it even got to where I needed to go.
Yeah, that's funny. I remember I have a take-home car now, which is awesome. But when you're in the patrol mix, so many times you hop in your car and sit down, and it's like someone's been farting in the seat all day long.
Well, the nice thing about a lot of the departments here in Florida, for those of you who are listening or are contemplating the move down here, because we're very accepting to other officers, is we start off with take-home cars. As soon as you're off FTO, you get a car assigned to you. It might be the crappiest car, but you do get a car assigned to you.
Yeah, who cares? I've said that to my chief before. He's like, we were talking about a new car coming into the fleet, and he's like, if you wait a year, then you'll get the next new one. And I said, I don't care what it is. I get to drive the thing home. I'm just glad that I'm driving a car home. I don't care which one I get, to this day, I don't care.
Well, I guess, one of the ways to look at it is that you take care of the car more than the cars that are in 24-hour circulation. Right? You're not beating it up. You're keeping it clean. You're getting it maintained. You're washing it. So there's a little bit more pride with it, usually, I would say. But yeah, it's a big selling point. And, it's a big selling point to live here in Florida. I'm surprised that you're still up in Massachusetts, really.
Well, I have to tell you, we have looked all around. We were born and raised in Mass. We lived in Southern California for 4 years, kind of my wife and I kind of indulged our wanderlust at the same time. Thankfully, we were both wanting to do something else, so we lived out in SoCal. And then
where in SoCal?
For a year. First year we lived in LA proper. We lived in Los Feliz. And then we moved to Ontario, which is like 40 minutes outside. In the last 2 years we were in the high desert, which was phenomenal. Which was so cool to live there. I was working from home, so I could live anywhere.
I spent 10 years in LA, so I'm very familiar with all those places you mentioned.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It was, when we pulled in, it was like end of 2016 and Trump was in office and they just never stopped losing their minds. It just got worse and worse and worse. I mean, it was insanity. It was really cool because, the thing about Southern California, and it's like everybody says this, but it's true, it's amazing. The topography, the different climates. You could literally, you could go to the high desert, you could go to the beach, you could go, there was a place like 40 minutes from us where you went, it was a little bit in elevation and they had fall. The leaves would change. They had an apple orchard. There was an old colonial village. Literally anything you wanted in Southern California, you could go there, but the humanity of it was kind of slowly ruining everything.
And the taxes.
Yeah, the taxes weren't so great. I think the income tax was like 9%, something like that, and then the property tax was not friendly either. We moved there with a new camper, like we had a new RV, and because the camper was under a year old, they made me pay sales tax to California. God. I was like, well, I paid 6 1/4 in Massachusetts. They go, well, you owe us 2 3/4 then. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, because it's under a year old, so you owe us the remainder.
Sure.
I was like, what? Oh, geez, yeah, make it. That was my first taste of California. It was like, wow, no wonder nobody like really wants to move here. It's like they get you around every corner. So anyways, all that to say, we started looking at we looked at Florida, Tennessee, Arizona, Texas, just places that more aligned with our values, But the bottom line is my whole family's from here. My mom and dad and my sister and my niece, and my parents are getting older and I have 3 kids. So it was like, every time they visited California, it was like, oh my gosh, they're like markedly older. Like you're getting older in front of my eyes. So we moved back to Mass. We came back not to the eastern part, to the western part. So we got a little house with 4 acres out in the woods. So it's really nice. But the politics and all that is like completely out of sync with us. It's kind of tough. So yeah, Florida sounds pretty good.
Well, today DeSantis just signed in to law constitutional carry, which I have some other officer friends who are not happy about it, but for me personally, I think it's a great thing. The bad guys, it didn't really affect them anyways.
They're going to carry anyways.
Right. Now it just makes it easier for, and I don't know what it's like up in Mass, but down here in Florida to get a CCW, all you have to do is pay someone for like a 4-hour class and then pull a trigger essentially. And then you can carry a gun. So I don't know the difference between that and, just carrying. It's not that much. To buy a gun, still the same, it's still federal law still applies. You still have to get the background check. And if, you're carrying a gun and you got an injunction, or we have RPOs down here, risk protection orders, it's still the same charge. So I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, other than the fact that now it's definitely more gun friendly.
Yeah, it's not so different here. There's, believe it or not, Mass has it's a 4-hour class for your license to carry. Obviously, they check your criminal background. It's issued by the chief of police, and you don't need to do any live fire at all. You just have a class with guns that you can touch, but you don't have to go to the range, and then you can have your license to carry. And they actually, because of that Supreme Court ruling last year, they've actually taken some power away from the chiefs in Mass with that ruling, where it was kind of like, you won't like this, whoever the chief of your town or city is could bring you in for an interview and say, what's your experience with firearms? Oh, I shoot when I was a kid, but I haven't for a long time, but I'd like to exercise my rights here and get a license. All right, well, we'll give you a license to carry Class B, target and range. Try that out for a year. Come back. We'll upgrade it to all lawful purposes. So they were giving the chief a lot of, and people did get attorneys and get that overturned in courts because I think the courts already knew, but they wouldn't do it unless you brought it to court. So the Supreme Court had a ruling, I forget which state it was, but they said, because of this ruling, they said, hey, that it's either you can or you can't. The chief of police doesn't get to put his will on it and say, make a judgment call. If you have no record, why does he get to infringe your right? So
I believe that was New York.
New York, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so the chief I work for likes it. It makes my job easier. He goes, I got no worries. I run their Corey, and they're good. They give me a certificate for the class. There's your license to carry. Boom.
Right.
There's no judgment he has to pass, kind of. So it's not so bad in Mass. They're just not. Gun culture here is very if someone if you go to reach for a paper towel at Costco and your gun sticks out, someone will probably call the cops and be like, this guy's got a gun.
Right.
You're not going to, it's not like Florida. You can go to Denny's with your 45 and get a plate of eggs at the buffet. That ain't flying here. Legally it's fine, but people's mindset is not there. They can't take it.
That actually was a case down here in Florida, a little bit north of where I'm at. And some guy, I believe it was Walmart, was reaching and displayed his firearm because he had a really short shirt, and he ended up being arrested for it. And
wow.
Yeah, well, as well as I do, there's always going to be somebody on your shift or in your department who's that guy who's going to, make that arrest. And, there's a difference between, a display.
Brandishing and just someone seeing it. There's a difference, right?
Right. And that's why they made that distinction, because of that episode, that, an accidental display of the firearms shouldn't cause you to be arrested. And well, I mean, you can be arrested, right? Everyone can do the ride. You just don't, it'll be thrown out.
Right.
That's why I tell people, because, people always, you're a cop, you know what it's like. You go to a party, everyone wants to ask you questions. Sometimes it's good questions and sometimes it's bad questions.
Stump the cop.
Why are you guys, first of all, the one I get is why are you guys always racist, right? That's one I get. And then another one too is why do you have to beat up people when you put them in handcuffs? Yeah.
We just had a training I went to, and it was on a diversity training, was part of the main training. They had to throw the hour of diversity training in, but I handed it to one of the instructors. He said he grew up in impoverished area, black guy, had his own perception of police and what their purpose was, and he did not like them. Totally flipped on that now, but he got the opportunity when he started doing these diversity classes to go to a police department and train on the simulation, the school shooting simulation. And he goes, I shot a guy holding a cell phone within 30 seconds. He goes, it just opened my eyes to, he goes, I was sweating. I had sweat coming down my forehead. All the cops are laughing at me. He goes, it's just, he didn't have that perspective of how difficult those situations are. And, I handed it to him that he changed his idea. At the end of the class, he thanked us and said, thank you for doing what you do. And I realized, when I was younger, I was with a certain crowd that elicited a certain response from you guys, and that's just the way it is. He kind of understood that. So, but that's typically at the party. That's not what you're getting. You're getting someone who's had a few cocktails. Your cousin that's kind of super liberal is flying off the handle, and you're not gonna win the argument. You know, it's just not gonna go your way. So, and then like stump the cop. Like, well, what? I always get like the super technical gun questions.
Right.
Well, in my car, it's a low capacity because the Mass gun laws are all jacked up. It's low capacity, but it's not pre-ban. And it's like, oh my dude, can I just have my beer and not crack open my firearms law book?
It's almost like when you told that instructor too, it'd be like, you know, these are the things that police see.
Right. Yeah. Hell yeah. I should have.
Yeah. But yeah, getting back to what you're saying at the parties, you know, the one I get always is the nystagmus test, right? Hey, do you know how to do the nystagmus? Like, yeah, let me explain to you what it is, you know? And I go to them, I'm like, yeah, you can't drive. Yeah, I mean, the slurring and the wobbliness, that's probably gonna be a problem, but the nystagmus, let me tell you, you can't drive on that.
Yeah. I did that to my mom, my sister once, because we were at my mom's house. No one was going anywhere. So they wanted to know. And it's like, follow with just your eyes. Right away, it's like, I'm like, that's one clue that you're failing already. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, follow with just your eyes. You got to follow instructions also. So it is really fun to do that to people. Arik, can we hear about a strange or bizarre thing you've dealt with in your line of work?
A strange or bizarre thing besides like every day in law enforcement, that usually qualifies as strange and bizarre. You know, I might have to circle back on that one. I wasn't prepared for a strange and bizarre question. Oh, my God.
I know you've got a tongue because we all do, but I'm putting you on the spot. So
you definitely put me on the spot because, you know, most of the time for the first part of my career, I would say it was, you know, just midnight shift and you're going in. So I don't know what kind of shifts you had now. Back then, when I first started, it was, you know, the 3 shifts. You know, it was 8-hour shifts. And as a new guy, you got, you know, like Tuesdays and Thursdays off, and the afternoon shift would always end up having, you know, like they're holding 22 calls by the time you hit roll call, so you would never have roll call, and you just have to go right into it and start answering all these you know, domestics, and you're winding up with 10 reports, and it was nonstop. The night went by really quick because of that. But it was always, you know, you're in the middle of a burglary and then, yeah, they have a shots fired call and you have to go to that. Bizarre. Well, so as a detective, there were some bizarre ones. So in my career, I've done, you know, the patrol and the FTO stuff. And then I was in training for a while in firearms training. Then I went into CI, criminal investigations, doing threat management. So we had a lot of threats against politicians, bomb threats, especially with big thing down here, I guess anywhere now, school threats.
Right.
We had this one threat case where this guy, it's so bad. This guy, he was gay, and he took a guy home. The guy fisted him, if you know what that is.
Oof, I do, unfortunately.
And while he was doing that, he threatened his life, saying that, you know, I'm going to kill you and do all this other stuff to you if you don't give me your money and whatnot. And then the guy had to make the report about that afterwards. Oh. And me and the other guy that I was with, we were just listening to this report, to not laugh and make light of this horrible situation. And he was so serious about it, but I couldn't imagine having to tell, you know, I would just eat the loss at that point. Having to tell 2 guys about your experience and in detail about what happened. Obviously, you know, he got the nickname Fister, and you know how cops are. Oh yeah. And it's on the board in the room, and yeah, so that would be up there as one of the most bizarre things that I had to deal with in law enforcement, for sure.
That's brutal, man. Yeah, I'm with you with the just, you know, take the L and move on if you're that guy. I remember when I was we had one of our detectives meet somebody in the lobby, and there was a massage place close to our police department actually that we had a lot of complaints about and we were starting to look at. and this guy came in, and he was like newly divorced guy. He went there for massage, and a gay guy owned the place, and he's telling the detective, because the detective left the lobby right back to where I was standing and told me. He's talking to the guy, and I can kind of see in the lobby, and the guy's telling him, I was getting a massage, and he rolled me over on my back, and he was doing my thighs, and then my balls, and then he gave me hand release. And the guy starts crying, telling him, he's bawling. He goes, "I'm not gay, but I just got divorced and he jerked me off." It was like,
I thought you meant something else. He was bawling.
Yeah, yeah, both. So, it's like when I heard that story, I had that exact thought. I'm like, just file that away. Never go there again. You don't need to come into the lobby and start saying that, where people can walk in and out. You're crying about a guy doing that to you. It was like, well, it confirmed our suspicions about the place.
Yeah. Well, there's, back in the day when you could taste cocaine to see if it was real, you can go bust these massage parlors and, actually, have the release. And then, of course, nowadays everything has changed. Not to say that I was doing that, but I heard stories. I read about the old guys would tell me these stories are the great things that they used to do. Walk up on someone, just smack them for standing around. Things that obviously we can't do anymore.
Yeah, chase. I had a couple old school Vice guys from LA on the podcast, and I was like,
"Oh God."
So, well, we had a 2 beer minimum, but it was usually about 12. Oh man.
We've done this, but you should do a whole podcast on the myths in law enforcement. Like you have to tell me that you're a cop if I ask, or, you can't drink or you can't do drugs in front of me if you're a cop. You can't get the blowjob if you're a cop, things like that. That would be kind of an interesting show with some of the right guys.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I remember going to a GNC before I was a cop, when I was like into lifting weights when I was a kid, and the kid working the counter was like, my dad's a police officer, because we were talking. My dad was a local cop, and he's like, the biggest, they used to sell Golden Seal or whatever that would flush your system. Right. And he goes, the number one client that we keep, he's like, we keep this in stock for task force guys. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, because they're living the life. They're not, there's going to be a moment when they're like, take a hit, narc, like you can't turn it down if you're really going to get in deep with these guys, So I think people so many friends have said it before, when they put the undercover cop in the jail cell, pretends to be a prisoner. That's entrapment. Right.
Yes. I thought Miami Vice was real when I was growing up. That's how they are. Then, they get to live that high-end lifestyle. And of course I was sadly mistaken when I came down to Florida. It wasn't really like that.
Yeah. They get that brown hide shoulder holster with the white blazer on.
Yeah.
And then just cruise around in a nice department bought convertible.
Yeah. I wanted the Ferrari, and I got this piece of crap Crown Vic. But
Arik, if you're trying to sell Florida law enforcement jobs, you get the white blazer, you get the convertible.
and the loafers. No, you don't need, there's really not much to sell in Florida. I mean, it sells itself. I mean, great salaries, no state tax, great weather, beautiful beaches, lots to do, the whole state. I say no tax. I think I did say no tax, no state tax. A great governor, very pro law enforcement.
Well,
our governor, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but our governor gave us not bonuses, but just like appreciation funds twice. And just to show the support that what we had to go through during COVID.
That's awesome, man. That like, we hear stories here of a few of the towns that are more towards the center or even conservative and like central Mass, be like, oh, all the officers got $7,000. We're like, what? Like, yeah, they had all these towns and cities got relief money and they could do almost anything with it. But the places that were more conservative gave it to their police and fire people. And we were like, what? Money? where did it go? I think our area spent it on like a water project or something. Then like told us they couldn't afford the cost of living increase this year. It's like inflation's like 16%. Help us out,
No, they're very competitive. Very competitive.
What would they do with a guy, just hypothetically? I can tell you our academy is, the academy I went to even years ago was about 800 hours, like 21 weeks. Would there be like a 4-week kind
crossover
of
yep.
academy?
Yep. They're looking for certified people, and you go through a modified like 4-week academy, and then you have a modified FTO process as well.
Interesting. Yeah.
And they usually start you at a higher step than if you were just a brand new officer.
Oh, so yeah, you get this step increase. You wouldn't have to start as like post-academy step 1. You would be.
Right. They could, depending on how many years of service you have. I forgot there's some equation that they use, at least in my department, how to give you a competitive salary. So yeah, I mean, I know guys that started, I think back then we were at 8 steps and they started at step 6.
That's great. Is there any sleepy little towns out there that pay well? Or do you have to go to the big city?
No. Sometimes the towns pay more than the city, believe it or not.
Man, I feel like I'm living in the upside down world.
Yeah, if you're in the South Florida area, it's definitely more metropolitan. So obviously the salaries are going to be higher, but the cost of living is higher. You go to the center of the state, you can get to a small department, but your cost of living there is so much cheaper.
Right.
It's like going. So I lived in New York before I came down here, and I was there for 9/11, and that was the deciding factor. If you were ever going to get to that question, why I became a cop was because of 9/11. Whenever I would visit my folks down here, it was just amazing to me at how cheap things were. Like everything was half price. It was like it was on a sale. Like milk was like, I don't know, back then it was like $7 a gallon or for whatever the gallon jug. And you come down here, it was like $2 for a gallon. That was a while ago, 20 some years ago, but it was amazing. And everything was clean.
Right.
You could take a car. I couldn't imagine raising a family in New York City. And so there was a lot of deciding factors on why I moved here.
Yeah, I bet. I have a buddy that lives in Brooklyn now, and I visit him a bunch of times. It's fun to visit, but I could never live there. But a lot of the people there shop at like the local bodega, and it's like $10.50 for a gallon of milk. It's like, how could you, unless you're like legit a single guy living with a roommate or a girlfriend, like, and you can eat like a box of Lucky Charms for the whole week for breakfast. I mean, but having children and like getting good nutrition, you have to be a millionaire to live in the city for that.
Yeah. And I always would say is like, you don't want to have a heart attack in the city because
you're dead. You're done.
Rush hour, the ambulance, no one is partying. No one's getting out of the way for the ambulance. The guy's like, where am I going? I can't get out of the way. So you're stuck. Yeah. It's a disaster. And there's no car seats in the cabs for the kids or in the Uber. Taking the subway. I mean, have you seen what the subway's like now?
Oh, it's scary.
I was there under Giuliani and Bill Bratton for the police commissioner. And there was a cop on every corner. It was the safest place I've ever been. It's funny. When I lived in LA, I got mugged at gunpoint.
Oof.
And then I went to New York and it was like the safe. I was like, thought it'd be worse. No, it was the safest place I ever felt. There's cops everywhere. Now it's different. But back then it was terrific.
Yeah. When I was a kid, in the late 80s, I remember before Giuliani, there was like the way the adults would talk that I knew that would been in New York. It was like, there's a good chance you'll be stabbed on the subway. Like you just don't take the subway. Women being raped in the park. Like it was like legit hell on earth. It was like, you don't go to New York City. And then I can remember Giuliani coming in and just it being the total opposite, going there like on a school trip and being like Times Square was like squeaky clean. It was, I mean, the riffraff was completely under control because they knew they couldn't get away with it. Now we're going the other way where it's like my buddy who lives in Brooklyn during the pandemic sent me a video of a guy on top of like a food truck shooting a flamethrower in the street, like over people, a flamethrower, like a homemade makeshift flamethrower. I was like, what? Like I'd have a panic attack if my wife had to leave the house with our kids. I'd be like, you can't, you just have to stay in the house. And when I come home with my duty issued weapons, we can go out to the grocery store. It's like, it's unreal, man.
Now in Mass, are you allowed to carry off duty?
Oh yeah. Yep. We can carry off duty. And, obviously we have, Leosa like everybody else too. So when we travel, I always carry, but yeah, they're like right in our union contract. It's like, if you do carry off duty, the department prefers you carry your duty weapon. But if you choose not to carry a duty weapon, they just request, if you want to be covered as a police officer, that you are qualified on that weapon that you do carry. It doesn't say you can't, but it says it's in your best interest to, like, say you have I have a Glock 43. I should qualify on that because now I'm, right, certified under the Training Council for Police. So yeah, they're good like that. Absolutely. It's not quite like Canada yet. 'Cause I've had some Canadians on here and they're like, yep, we check my gun in and go home. And they actually will let them take them home because they've had, of course you could be working a case where people are after you and tracking your movements. And then the chief constable or whoever's in charge of your station will give you permission to carry to your house for a period of time. But then they, again, make you keep your gun at the station. You can't, which to me is like insanity. You have qualified, trained police officers. Why not, kind of like the spirit behind Leosa, why not have these people have their guns? I mean, it seems counterproductive, but when you talk with somebody from Canada or Australia, they really don't, it's just a completely different culture. So to them, they see the school shootings and things and they're just like, we never have those because nobody's armed. I mean, the citizens don't have as easy access.
But they do have them.
They do have them, but not the frequency that we do. Or if they do, they're not putting them in the media like we do. Because you and I both know if you want to get it done, there's mass stabbings in China where 17 people are murdered with a katana dagger. You're going to get it done if you want to get it done. But
people drive people.
But yeah. But I mean, it's the, like, I don't know if George Washington actually said it, but you hear that the founding father said that the firearms are the teeth of liberty. It's like,
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, which is usually when you hear stats about just how common depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions are. But this May, the leading virtual therapy provider Talkspace is bringing awareness to the fact that people do get better with the help of therapy and celebrating everybody putting in the effort to improve how they feel and function. If you think therapy could help you progress toward a mentally healthier place, Talkspace is here for you. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule wherever you feel most at ease. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members only pay a $25 copay or less. No insurance? No problem. Now get $100 off your first month when you go to Talkspace.com/better. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/better. Talkspace.com/better.
If you look at the world and any place that ever tried to hold on to free speech, right after the guns were gone, the speech was gone. So like in Germany, if you say the word Nazi in a context that someone hears you and they feel it wasn't appropriate, you can be charged criminally for saying a word. Canada, they've arrested stand-up comedians for poking fun at the LGBTQ community. They've arrested comedians for hate speech, where there's gay people in the audience that were like, it was a funny joke. Like, it's fun to poke fun at things. It's okay. Like, that's the comedian's job, is to make light of serious things, So in my opinion, that's the road you go down, and just because history tells us that,
I agree with you 100%. I talk about it all the time. In this country, we're founded on that liberty, and we have that Constitution. Not many countries do have that. And listen, it's headaches, but it's also a blessing at the same time.
Right.
We're a big country, and we've got a lot of guns. And there's no way in hell we could do what Australia did. There's no way in hell we can do what England did or the United Kingdom did. And they have crime. They just don't talk about it. We have crime too.
Oh, London's one of the most violent cities in the civilized world.
So why would we give up our ability to defend ourselves? And it's always coming from people who have people surrounding them with guns.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Arik, can you take us to a scenario you had where you would say you were the one of the most intense scenarios you've had, or scariest calls you've had?
Well, that I think that was 3 that you mentioned there: intense, serious, and scary. So does it have to meet all of those criteria, or can we just focus on one criteria?
You pick.
Okay. Well, obviously, any school threat is serious. When we get intelligence that someone called in a threat, and now that I'm back on the road, having to deal with that where kids are involved, and we know the majority of the time it's not going to be the threat. Right. It's, we just look at the most recent one in Nashville. The person didn't make a threat ahead of time that I'm coming to shoot the school. The people who are going to do it are going to do it.
Right.
The people who are going to commit suicide are going to commit suicide. They're not going to call and tell somebody I'm going to commit suicide, because that's a call for help.
Right.
The people who want to do it are going to do it. Just like the people who want to blow up something, they're going to blow up something. They're not going to say there's a bomb in the school. Those are the people who are trying to create a commotion, get notoriety, whatever they want to do. But of course, we know, when we were just talking too, that in this country there's a lot of school shootings, unfortunately. Or how about this? There's mass shootings, right? Because it could be a supermarket, it could be FedEx distribution center. When you get these calls, it is intense. When you got the kids there, and I feel bad for kids growing up this day. I never, ever, we had a fight in school. It was a fight in school. It was done with. Yeah, it might have been brutal, guy taken to the curb, whatever, but it was done.
Right.
Now you got to worry about all sorts of things, that someone's going to pull a gun, someone's going to shoot somebody. And when these, because you can't live as a kid today without seeing it all the time, without seeing it on social media, without seeing it on the news of these school shootings. So when this happens and you see the looks on these kids' faces when you're there, it is a little scary. And so unfortunately, I've had to go to many of these threats at school where you have to go in, you have to do it, you have to play it by the numbers, and you got to find where that person is and make sure it's safe before you let the kids go. So I would say that was pretty intense. Another one was intense when, I was on a domestic, and this was probably my first year on. And it was right out of roll call, bad domestic. The hang-ups, they finally got through. Person saying she's being choked. Get there. I guess the dad opened up the door, saw us, slammed the door. We were able to get inside. It was a lot of yelling. And then next thing I know, the guy jumped on my partner. It was like trying to take his eyes. Oh. So I go to help him, and the 17-year-old son didn't like us. When I went to go help my partner, sucker punched me right in my nose, broke my nose. Oof. And I was seeing stars. And then it was just like, it was on, and he was going to town on my face. He was just all this rage that I don't know where, if it was against me, law enforcement, or the fact that it was against his dad, whatever. But I really thought that I was going to lose consciousness. And if I didn't get, to my gun, he was going to take my gun. Luckily, I was able to grab. The only thing I could see at the time was his gonads. Mm. I got a hold of them, and I squeezed as hard as I possibly could just to get him to stop punching me in the face.
Yeah.
Blood. I'm just bleeding all over the place. I get him to the ground. I'm able to subdue him. At that time, my partner comes in with the dad, throws the dad in the bathroom, right into the mirror. We get control of it. And it was horrible. You know, I was out for like a month, broken orbital, broken nose, the whole 9 yards. My first year on the job. Me and that guy, we're still friends. We work in the same district now again, and we're best friends for life. Very close. But yeah, that was a eye opener, so to speak.
Yeah, that's scary, man. When you break you say ocular cavity, so the socket of your eye, does it affect your vision? Is it immediate, or is it later? Does it swell way up?
So what the ophthalmologist was concerned of is that your ball would stick if it didn't heal properly. I was lucky that everything healed properly. I still have a little bit of a thing with my nose, but other than, it was obviously uncomfortable. I've had my nose broken before, so it was, I guess, easier to break, but this was like a full on punch right to the face. You see the birds flying around. I mean, I totally, did not see it coming. And that's police work. And it was lucky. And unfortunately, there was a rookie officer standing at the door, just like with his mouth open. He didn't help one bit.
Oh, no. Yeah, he was probably just completely fight, flight, or freeze mode.
He was in total freeze mode.
Oh, that's too bad. Did he make it? Did he stick with the job?
Yeah, he stuck with the job. He eventually made it to a specialized unit. And at the same time, we shared the channel with another super busy, it was a different department, but we dispatched for them. So at the same time, and it was constantly busy, but at the same time, they were in like a car chase. So they had the air while this was going on. So it was very confusing for people to finally realize what was happening.
Oh, that sucks.
Until we got everything under control. Once we got under control, then the cavalry arrived, but we had already taken care of business. So
during your time off, did you ever think, maybe I don't want to do this line of work? Or did you think, I want to get better to get back in there? Like, how was because you're young at this point, and it's like, this is a real wake-up call where someone, essentially, if allowed to, may have killed you. I mean, did you have those thoughts before going back on the job?
I never had the thought. People thought I wasn't going to come back, but I never had those thoughts. I went into law enforcement. I was 31, maybe 31. I don't know. I guess I'm giving away my age. 31, 32. And I was already a grown up. So I never had those kind of thoughts. When I was in the academy, a guy who just got out of the academy was shot and killed. So I had a bunch of guys that I was in the academy with who said that wasn't for them, so they left. But I've never had those kind of thoughts. The only thoughts that bother me the most, and I'm sure you can relate to it, Steve, is that seeing the horrible things that have happened to children.
Yeah.
Right? I've seen some horrific things. I've seen kids dead, kids ripped apart in car crashes. All those are the things that get to me. I just had a case finally go to court, and they finally got the guy. It was a drunk driver coming across. Let me tell you, this has got to be the worst story ever, because this family from Minnesota got, I know that's bad as it is, but the family from Minnesota won the lottery, and they came down to Florida to follow the Minnesota Twins in their spring training. So they came down to the West Coast. They drove over to the East Coast, and there's Alligator Alley. You drive across it for the day, and they were driving back. As they're driving back, there's a drunk driver, illegal alien, toasted, flying, right? So they're getting phone calls of this guy flying. He crosses like no man's, he loses control, crosses no man's land. There's no barrier. Goes into the opposing traffic, hits this van that this family's in. So this family had two other families, 15 people inside this huge van. And it's got the doors that open like this. Mm-hmm. So all the kids that are in there were not wearing seatbelts. So as it's flipping over, the door's opening and the car's flipping on. I get there, right? It took me from where I was 15 minutes to get there at a high rate of speed. I've never had, I was in a Charger. I had it floored just to get out there because we're getting all these updates, people saying, there's dead body here, there's bodies here. And I get there. I tell you, I'll never forget this. The whole freeway is littered with kids and screaming. And this mom, unfortunately, she was next to her daughter. The mom had a broken back. The daughter was dead.
Oh.
Another girl was dead. And I'm just like, I don't even know where to begin. Fire rescue shows up. We just start triaging as what we can, get the helicopter. I mean, it was just, they finally convicted this guy like about 3 or 4 months ago. And this was, I don't know, going back 5 years. But that was, you want to talk intense? Yeah, that was, I'll never forget that. I still see the images of the dead kids.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine, brother. That's rough. Wow. Yeah, we had I've said this before on the podcast, but I was a natural resource officer for the first 4 years of my career, and the guy who just left, who I took his spot, he went to a drowning where he pulled a young boy out of the pond, and he exact same age, hair color of his son. And from what I heard was like after that happened, he would like every single night just sit on the end of his son's bed and watch him sleep because he couldn't sleep. Understandable. He just couldn't get it out of his mind. So I think in the men and women that have come on the show and talked about things that happen to kids, it seems like that is like the truly haunting thing that, cops have to endure. And it's crazy that, talking about not getting respect or people not appreciating you, that stuff happens in the smallest communities. I mean, there's fatal accidents everywhere, and there's a man or woman in uniform that's going to go to that and kind of absorb all that trauma. So that's intense, brother.
Yeah, I think for law enforcement, it's universal. No matter where you work, what size of department you are, you're gonna see these horrible things, and you're gonna have, for some people, PTSD if it affects you. I know it doesn't affect everybody. It's never bothered me like that. I don't wake up with nightmares. But then you're going to get that. You're going to get the most amount of stress you're going to get. It's going to come from within the department.
Yeah.
Right. It's universal. Everyone I've ever talked to is the same thing, that the most stress that they've ever felt is from inside the department, because for whatever reason, we're our own worst enemy.
Yeah. I've seen that a lot, where it's like it's easy to lose sight of why you got into it and the people you're serving, because you're angry at an injustice that was done to you at the office. But it shouldn't affect how you serve the people. But there's really if a guy's really done dirty, he's got no outlet to fight back, but to just go stagnant, just not be proactive or, whatever, shut it down. I've seen that a bunch of times in my career, where it's sad, man. There's so many times where, and you know it because you're a cop, been for many years, you'll see somebody climb the rung and then like you don't know who they are anymore, and you're like, it's like, remember the union meetings? Remember when you were president or whatever it is? It's like, wow, what a 180, because all of a sudden they're worried about their own hide, and they're not. It's like it's legitimately like a different person. And I've known people who have retired out of places that didn't even have, not even a retirement party for them, because they did everybody so bad, and they knew it, and they said, I don't want a party. Yeah, because none of us would go. That's because of what you've done. Yeah, so that's bad, man. Arik, can you tell us a heartwarming story from your career? This can be a tough one for us.
Heartwarming. I'll tell you. Okay, so the closest thing when you said that jumped into my mind, and again, I'm sure you can relate to this since you're also a firearms instructor. So for me, one of the best things as a firearms instructor was seeing when someone got it. Now, here's a shocker. Most cops don't shoot very well.
Yeah.
And a lot of cops don't like carrying a gun. And they rarely practice with the gun.
And they don't want to go to a public range where people will see them shooting, because then they'll go, you're supposed to be an expert, you're a cop. So that deters them from even practicing.
Right. And then they come to their in-service class or their quals, but if you're lucky to have other extracurricular classes, firearms classes, they won't take them, but maybe they'll sign up for it because a friend is. And you have time to sit there with them and maybe show them something that they're doing incorrectly. And for the first time, I had somebody, so we had a plate rack at 10 yards. And it was part of their in-service, so we had different steel sections for people to come out. But the plate rack is obviously, people see the plate rack, they get so uptight about it. And this person hated it because they could never hit the plates. And it's embarrassing because you're in front of your peers.
A lot of pressure.
No one cares, but they feel like everyone's watching them.
Sure.
And I saw the way that this lady was pulling the trigger, and I said, just try doing this. And she did it. And she did it 6 times in a row and hit the plate 6 times. She just broke down crying. Because she's never, and she was a veteran 20 plus years. I can't remember how long.
Yeah.
Never ever been able to do that, which is kind of scary if you ask me, but she's never been able to do that. And here she was able to finally. And so as an instructor, to me, those were those great moments that I was able to affect change on somebody. Now, whether she did anything afterwards with that knowledge, I don't know. But at least in class, at least at that moment, she was in the moment and was able to connect everything properly to get her hits.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've had similar experiences with a really good time for that I found was when we switched to a new gun, a new sidearm. Mm-hmm. And it was like kind of an excuse for everybody to be like, well, it's new. And they weren't so embarrassed for you to be like, hey, you know what? Make sure you get as much of your hands in contact with the gun as possible. Keep the thumbs pointed down range, like this, and kind of change their grip, change the way they're doing their sight picture and their trigger pull. That's like the huge thing where they're always shooting to the left because they're anticipating. And those were some moments I had where it was like guys who were vets all of a sudden were like getting better scores, and it wasn't such, but I was, kind of doing it with everybody on the line, kind of making it a universal thing, even people that didn't need it, just like a reminder. And that's what I loved where I used to work. We would have summer cops. Now it's gone by the wayside because they're getting rid of reserves in mass because of police reform. But we used to have like an abbreviated academy where you could be a reserve officer, but you didn't have to go through the full academy. And then you could come work. And usually you'd ride with a full-time guy or direct traffic. But I would get them either one-on-one, one at a time, or like in a small group, 2 or 3. And you can really mold a shooter in that scenario. And they're brand new. So there's no pride. There's no ego. There's no, I've been doing this 20 years. Can we leave right after lunch? Do we have to do the full 8 hours? That's the first questions you get with firearms. Like, are we doing the whole day? And those guys, those kids would really just ate up everything you said like a sponge, with trigger pull and trigger reset, whatever you were doing. And they came out better shooters than trying to work on the vet who just didn't want to be there, wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. And that was my hardest thing when I took over firearms, and I had I made some people do remedial. Like certain stages, you can't miss this many rounds. They changed it in Massachusetts, so it was stricter. And I made people shoot remedial, and it was like, really? Like, people were like, and I was like not a senior guy at the department. So having someone shoot remedial was like, oh, I thought he was a nice guy. He's a hard ass. I'm like, I'm not a hard ass, man. I have to record this. Like, this has to be, but once you get over that little speed bump, because the beautiful thing about being a range master is there's really no rank on the range.
That's right. Absolutely right.
Anybody can call a safety violation, of course, but the range master is in charge. And by the way, you put me in charge to make sure everybody can shoot. So even if you're a deputy chief or something, and I'm like, hey, we got to get through this qualification. Why don't we step aside and do this or whatever? That was hard for me because I was, in my late 20s doing it. And these guys are, some of them in their 50s, But like you said, people will go a whole career with firearms and just kind of like somehow squeak through or avoid any kind of correction. We had the old 870 shotguns when I first started, no recoil pad, and we had females. And I right away I was like, how are they qualifying on these? It's 870 Magnum loads, no recoil pad. I'm like, this is, and sure enough, probably 125 pounds. She's on the stage where she's getting towards the end of the shotgun qual, tired, on one knee, did a admin reload, and then was just supposed to shoot. Gun came right out of her. The foregrip came right out of her hand. I caught it behind her, and I was like, "This is not good." And she told me, "I hate this weapon. I'll never use this weapon." We didn't have rifles yet, so it was like the handgun or the shotgun. They just collected dust because everybody was afraid of them. Especially little like people small stature. And then they show you the next day the yellow and purple on their shoulders. So it's like they're afraid to shoot the weapons. Then, I'm going on a offshoot here. But then the rifles came along and everybody's like, these things are the best things since sliced bread. I love the rifle. These are the best.
It's just they can't reload. That's the only problem.
Yeah, right. Good thing they have 30 rounds.
Right.
Yeah. That's another thing I have to fight for is more rifle work.
I always see in the calls that because you have to do a reload in a certain amount of time. And that's where people have the most problem is that either they take forever in the reload or they forget they have to reload or they forget to send the bolt forward on the reload. One of those three always happens. And so,
use your palm. And then they're like, when it goes dry, it locks back. They look at it like they've never seen it.
Right.
They're like, what is this thing? It's empty? I didn't think this thing ran out. Arik, one of the most popular questions I ask, because there's a lot of people listening to the show that are thinking about law enforcement or they're in backgrounds or they're just getting on board. And that is advice somebody with your years of experience would give to a candidate or a new recruit coming on the job.
I would say don't do it. I'm just kidding. That's the salty dog version of, don't do it, kid. Look, I appreciate I sit on some oral boards. So it is a type of question that I ask people all the time. It's like, why do you want to be in law enforcement?
Sure.
I know that you want to do this job, and it conceptually is a very cool job. It pays really well. I had someone say, well, I applied for Walgreens and I applied for this, and you guys called first. I'm like, oh, great.
Just who we want.
Exactly. Next, be professional. I think right now, and I've talked to Mike Wood, the guy we were referencing before. We've talked about how cyclical history has become. And like right now, we're living through the 70s all over again without the bell bottoms. But we're in terms of how law enforcement is perceived and the attacks on law enforcement. So we're going through that right now, but it will get better. And you guys are going through coming into law enforcement with technology. When I started, that was probably the beginning of technology. Because when I first started, all my reports were handwritten. All my probable cause affidavits were handwritten. All the calls coming in were handwritten. You had to listen to dispatch and get it. Now you have that computer and you are tied to that computer because everything is done. You can swipe that DL and everything's populated for you on the crash report, on a ticket. When people come to me like, I can't write tickets, I'm like, my God, I had to handwrite tickets and I had to make sure that it pressed hard because it was 5 copies and all that. And we had to force them to sign it. If they didn't sign it, they went to jail, and I never wanted to do that. Now it doesn't matter. So it's much easier now with technology. You got the body cameras. Like them or hate them, they're here. They've helped a lot of people. I know people were very against them when we first got it, but from what I've seen and as a trainer, I think they've helped a lot of people. So you've got that going with you. So you're coming in with all this great technology. Just be professional about things and be, here's another thing that I see, especially for young guys, go out there and work. You really want to do this job, but go out there and work. I see it's so easy for guys not to work.
Yeah.
And it's that generational thing. Everything will come in due time. I was able to have a variety of things that I did here before I kind of really settled in the training aspect. But you'll find it what it is. But you have 2 years on, maybe get a little bit more experience before you want to go into all these special units. So go out there and work, enjoy the job that you went out to do.
There's nothing wrong with being a patrolman. That's where you learn everything.
Absolutely. And we need good patrolmen. Not everyone is a SWAT guy. And, here's the whole thing about SWAT guys. And I'm not trying to piss off any SWAT guys. A lot of my friends are SWAT guys because there's a big nexus between training and SWAT. But they usually do things with a whole group of guys. You're going to be the first ones there. Yeah. Think of Nashville, right? You could be the Nashville guys. I mean, that was just a classic example of proactive, hard-charging officers doing the right thing at the right time.
Textbook. Yeah, that's great advice, brother. Yeah, I see it just like you do with younger generations. And I don't want to harp on the younger generation all the time. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of brains and smarts in it. But you do, especially with the great exodus of police work, you do see younger people like making sergeant or detective, and they see that. And I hear a lot of like, well, I've been here 2 years. I'd like stripes, or I'd like to be the detective. I'd like to be a detective. Or I've had guys say like, I've been here a year and a half and I expressed that I wanted to be in SWAT and I've heard nothing. And it's like, yeah, like take it easy. Like they're almost kind of expectant of, but at the same time, not so into working an overtime shift that can't be filled or doing a traffic grant. You know what I mean? Like not so into that, but definitely into a specialty or a pin or chevrons or whatever. So that kind of, that definitely is a challenge, especially when police admin is kind of like overextending when you don't have a good applicant pool and you need to hire people. You start talking about your specialties. Hey, you can do this. We can do that. Like, it's like, so they hear all this in the pitch and then they do like 6 months or a year and they're like, well, this is, I'm just shagging calls here. I want to be a special boy. You know what I mean? I want a little designation. So I definitely see that. But Arik, can you tell us a little bit about Firearms Nation podcast? Because like I said before, I am a fan, just got into it. What can people expect when they go to that?
So I started Firearms Nation 2017, and like I said, I was on midnight shift, and back then, right, to listen to a podcast, you had to download the MP3 onto a I don't even know what they were. It wasn't even there weren't any iPods.
Like a Zune or something?
Like a Zune, yes. It was exactly it. It was Zune. And then to listen to it. And then they had XM radio. I'm like, oh my God, this is the greatest. So yeah. I had the antenna on my squad car and the box and everything. And I'd be able to drive around and listen to the XM, the talk radios. But they were eventually became, those talk radio shows, a lot of them became podcasts. But regardless, so I always loved listening to it. So I said one day I was going to do it. I had spent 5 or 6 years at that point in training, and I was able to train with some of the top instructors that are out there. And I had already a network. I compete in shooting, so I knew a lot of the top competitors. So I said, well, I would love to interview them because a lot of people don't get the benefit of the type of training that I was able to go to.
Right.
And to understand a lot of these concepts that a lot of these instructors give to those students, because that's the thing too. I mean, like we just said, the average cop doesn't really get out and train. Whereas if you're in SWAT or you're in a specialized unit, you get a lot of training, and it's easier for those instructors to train those people. It's hard to train the people who don't want to be trained. But regardless, so that was the genesis of why I started the Firearms Nation podcast back in 2017. Obviously, if I do the math correctly, we're at 6 years now, roughly. I think it was March. So yeah, 6 years of interviewing people, 200 plus episodes. It's been such a great ride. It's been up and down. When I was testing for sergeant, I had to slow it down just a little bit, but I kept doing it because it is a passion of mine. And, as we got into 2023, I started, doing more of the video stuff like you're doing here. I love doing it. And so it's a great show. So I talk to military guys. I talk to, tactical trainers. I talk to competitive shooters, world champions. I also talk to anybody who's in the Firearms Nation. So I've had authors on who this great guy who has been on Fox News many times, David Harsani. He wrote a book about,
I listened to him on The Federalist.
Yeah, he's an author for The Federalist too.
He's awesome. I love that guy.
It was he wrote this great book about how guns basically defined America. I talked to Nathan Gorenstein, who wrote all about the Browning, John Moses Browning. And so it's interesting to have these authors on, and because, we share something in this country that other countries don't have. And it's a love of firearms. A lot of places, we have problems with it, true. But there is a love, there is a culture of firearms, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're an everyday carry person, or whether you're in the military, we are surrounded by guns. And while there's some negative things about it, I think it does some amazing things protecting us and keeping our liberties. So that's the reason. It's a podcast to help people understand more about the people who are already in this world. The one thing I haven't talked to, I haven't talked to hunters. I'd like to talk to some hunters.
Yeah, that's a whole nother, I got a good hookup. I can get you with Wayne Saunders. He was on Northwoods Country on Discovery Channel, but Game Wardens.
Okay.
Those guys are all very pro-gun, and he was in, Saunders was in a crazy gunfight as a game warden in New Hampshire. That was, I'm talking sovereign citizen, went to the town hall, executed the staff, and he confronted them. I mean, he's got a podcast himself, but
I love that.
Big gun guy. I'll hook you up with him. He's a good dude. I have to I'll tell everybody right now, it's a good podcast, your podcast. Podcasts are awesome because you can have a radio station and it almost doesn't matter who you are. You can do it on your phone. That being said, I rarely listen to new podcasts, and especially in the law enforcement or firearms field, because they're not good. Like you listen and you're like, it's just not, the host is always interrupting. The guests don't know what's going on. It's they tell inside jokes with their buddy. Like they thought hey, choir practice would be fun to be a podcast, but it's like, no, we don't know you. You're not Joe Rogan. Like we don't, there's no interest in your life. But for your podcast, you have your guests on and you do a great job hosting. It's professional. You don't interrupt. They speak. Like it's a good listen, guys. The audio production is really good. So I'm a fan, a new subscriber, and I would strongly urge everybody listens to this show to go check it out, because Firearms Nation is very cool. And I would love to get down to Florida, have you train me up a little bit, polish my firearm skills as an instructor. If my podcast would ever take off a little bit more and I could get a little bit more income from it, I would take a plane down there and impose on you if you were willing.
Well, that's awesome. And I would love to have you on my show likewise. So we'll set them. Yep.
Absolutely. All right, Arik, I'm going to do the outro. Can you, and links for his podcast and how to get a hold of him and his YouTube channel will be in the show notes, so check that out. But I'm going to do the outro for the show. I got to thank the Patreon sergeants. And then can you hang on for just a couple of minutes longer and I can get back with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Arik Levy. Super interesting. Wow. And I mean that. If I could ever hop on a plane and get down and get some of that training with his knowledge, I would be more than happy to do that. He might be surprised at it when I show up. You got a spare room, Arik? Because I might just have money for the plane ticket. Guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for checking out the show. If you're new, today, this is a time in the show where I thank the Patreon sergeants. So if you didn't know, if you really love the show, you've listened to a bunch of episodes and you find value in it and you love it, and you want to show me a little appreciation, you can be a patrolman for $5 or a sergeant for $10. They both come with different things that you'll get. Both of them come with direct access to me, so that's a huge bonus for you. You can just write me a message and I will write right back. But this is the time when I thank the Patreon sergeants. Wrong audio. There we go. I'm talking about Sarah Pomeroy, the great Sarah Pomeroy from Down Under, the impeccable Andy Biggs, the handsome Greg Gadboy, Adam Mehall, the great Chris June, Gary Steiner, Jake Pinito, John Shoemaker, Lauren Stimson, Lane Campbell, Seth Wright, William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long to you, James Rose, the great Tony Fahey, Ben Peters, ladies and gentlemen. He's here. He's donating. Braden Walker, Corey Payne, Jason Lau, the great Mike Wynn, Nathan Gowan, Sasha McNabb, Scott Minkler, the great Scott Minkler, Tammy Walsh, everybody, Seth Clifford, Dennis, because that's all he put, one name, Motor Cop Chronicles, the Iceman, George Tessier, Nick Noose, Scott Young, the great Tom Connell, everybody, Wayne Miller, Derek Warden, Burley Boards, that's Dan Carlson from Burley Boards, restart it because the list is getting long, Doug and Kelly Newman, what a handsome couple, Joe DeVries, love you buddy, Dave Ellman, Elliot Sykes, Holly Vanover, and Richard Tolles. You guys keep the boat afloat. You keep the lights on, and I appreciate you and everything you do. I love you. I'm in love with you. Even if you don't reciprocate, that's just fine because that's the way it is. Guys, I will see you next time.